Sammy Brown has received a crystal ball to the University of Clemson after his visit to Clemson, and honestly, a big recruiting weekend for Clemson in general. And we have to talk about how this is going to impact Oklahoma, but also impact another team as well in the SEC. But before we dive into it and talk a little bit more about Sammy Brown, go ahead and hit that like and hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you all are thinking down in the comments below. Do you think Sammy Brown will end up being a Clemson Tiger? So, five-star linebacker Sammy Brown. This has kind of been the talk that has been the most popular here on this channel and other places. And it's been around the number one linebacker in the country and where will he land? A lot of people were saying Georgia. Georgia. Kirby Smart coming off 2 straight national championships. You've got Dylan Raiola, the number 1 QB in that class, committed to Georgia. That's kind of where a lot of people were looking, right down the road. But Clemson's coming in swinging, and so is Wes Goodwin with Clemson. And this is something that if you are an Oklahoma fan and you watch this channel, this is something I've kind of tried to explain a lot over the past several months of talking about Sammy Brown. Because while Georgia and Clemson seemed to be the leaders, you started to hear a lot of talk around Oklahoma, Ted Roof, Brent Venables, how they have relationships with Sammy Brown from their time at Clemson, and how Sammy Brown liked his visits at Oklahoma, how at one point he even said Oklahoma was one of the best visits that he had taken up to that time. And so a lot of OU fans feel excited and feel like, okay, we have a shot here. And although crystal balls and future casts and the RPM machine doesn't mean everything, but it does mean something. And the best of the best when it comes to crystal balls, Steve Wiltfong submitted one in favor of Clemson. And Wes Goodwin out there at Clemson just doing a damn good job at recruiting. And Sammy Brown's first visit to Tennessee went really well. You heard the bar was set high. Obviously, Clemson has done something. I do want to preface this by saying this. Clemson has a very similar policy to Brent Venables, Dabo Swinney. It's a, when you're committed here, you're committed. So if Sammy Brown is committed to Clemson silently and we're just waiting for a formal announcement, then it would make sense that the visit to Georgia on the 9th will not happen. And a visit to Oklahoma on the 16th and a visit to Ohio State on the 23rd will not happen. Those visits will be canceled. The writing might be on the wall. And how does this affect Oklahoma? Well, it affects Oklahoma because over at Georgia, they really thought they'd land Sammy Brown. So who are they going to go after now? They're probably going to turn their eyes to the number 2 linebacker in this country. Some sites will have him as the number 1 linebacker, but that's Justin Williams from Oak Ridge High School out of Conroe, Texas. Who else is at Conroe, Texas? Oh, Joseph Jonah Ajonye? Yeah. So here's kind of where I'm getting at. If Georgia loses on Sammy Brown, they have to turn their attention to Justin Williams. And they land Justin Williams, who, by the way, has been on a visit to Georgia. And Joseph Jonah Ajonye has said that Georgia was one of his favorite visits. It's his dream school. He might take an opportunity to go play with one of his friends and one of his teammates at Georgia. It might take Oklahoma out of it. So not only could Oklahoma lose Sammy Brown in this deal, but the ramifications of losing Sammy Brown to Clemson could ultimately cause Joseph Jonah Ajonye to go play at Georgia. You might say, hey, well, that's a lot. Well, I want you to read between the T lines. Joseph Jonah Ajonye, Justin Williams, they're in the same class. They play on the same defense. They go to school together. You know they're friends. Joseph Jonah Ajonye has already talked highly of that Georgia visit. So if Justin Williams goes out there, Could Joseph Jonah Ajonye follow him? Yes, there's also a possibility he doesn't. There's also a possibility Ajonye wants to take his own step, do his own thing, and ends up at Oklahoma. There's that possibility as well. But I think if Sammy Brown was to end up at Clemson and Georgia was looking like they were favored to land Justin Williams, I think all of a sudden that Joseph Jonah Ajonye recruitment for Todd Bates becomes a little bit more interesting. Because, like I said, you already heard from Joseph Jonah Ajonye himself that this was his favorite visit. Georgia did the best. But Sammy Brown, one of the most highly coveted recruits in this class, one that could completely reshape the defense at Oklahoma. And how you look at Oklahoma defensive line recruiting, or just not defensive line, defense recruiting. At 6'2.5", 225 pounds, Sammy Brown is a difference maker. Now, I still believe that Sammy Brown's best path for NIL money is going to be at Oklahoma. And you might laugh at me, but let me explain why. There is a player by the name of Brian Bosworth that had played at the University of Oklahoma. Very similar looking to Sammy Brown. Now, does their play style look similar? We'll have to find out to see. But if Sammy Brown was to get on campus at OU, wouldn't be a doubt in my mind that Sammy Brown and Brian Bosworth could be an NIL hit. Commercials galore. But in a recent interview with Josh Newberg, and you had, I'm totally blanking on his name right now, J.D. Piquel, after the on-3 camps that they had, it sounded like Sammy Brown said that NIL, it wasn't really going to play a factor into his recruitment. So, yeah, Sammy Brown committed, well, not committed, but crystal balled to Clemson by Steve Wiltfong. Could impact the Georgia Bulldogs. Well, it will impact the Georgia Bulldogs. It could impact the Oklahoma Sooners by what the Georgia Bulldogs decide they're going to do at that position. So, guys, go ahead, jump down in the comments below, and let me know what y'all's thoughts are around one of the most intriguing recruits this year. Do the Clemson Tigers ultimately land Sammy Brown? And do you think if they do land Sammy Brown, it impacts Oklahoma's chances at landing Joseph Jonah Ajonye?